Hello and welcome to Stampscaping 101. These are three scenes right here that I have completed from the sky background stamp-along video from the previous video lesson. Okay, I had these all kind of laid out if you watched the previous video, and I was looking at them a couple times during the day when I was coming into my, my stamping area, and I really felt the itch, or the urge. I was compelled to finish some of these off. I thought, yeah, I really like those backgrounds, but they're just not done. So, as far as a complete scenic stamping statement, okay, as far as sky figures, these look fine, right? But, the only difference between, some of these stamp-along videos and, kind of more of a complete value statement is I add more colors to these types of backgrounds. And, I could just leave some of these as just a statement on sky, but I like adding in things like foreground like that, just to kind of anchor, these skyscapes to something, kind of terrestrial, and it puts us as a viewer kind of in the scene by having these land elements. Okay, but anyways, what this lesson kind of is about taking the sky figures and having those kind of as the establishing kind of detail within a scene. Those are the things that kind of establish mood, as I was saying in the previous video. We might have these things, land elements in a scene, but I think for me it tends to be what's happening in the sky that kind of sets the mood of a scene. This was another kind of a stamp-along video, or not kind of stamp-along video, it was a stamp-along video, but this one doesn't have any sky figure at all. It's just we've kind of gone in and added some streaks of color, and that establishes the mood of a scene like this, okay? This is a scene that can also be, I can also have a moon rising from the background, or stars in the sky, or that sun right up here, with those types of colors in here, and it would really change the look, right, of this setting down here. So in these three scenes right here, I think that's very apparent as far as kind of what's establishing the mood of each one of these right here. I could do these in different colors and whatnot, and a moon doesn't have to have kind of this softer glowing type of light in here. I could do it in this warm tone color scheme if I wanted to, just for artistic license, right? Same thing, each one of these color schemes could be mixed and matched. I wouldn't mix, these colors over the top of these colors, but I'm just saying I could change, all of these different color schemes could be, mix and match with each of these settings in here. But anyways, going back to what I was talking about here, this one right here tends to be a little bit more of a muted look in terms of lighting, okay? This is the star cluster stamp right here, and used in here, I've retained some of the lighter kind of white of the paper looks in here, but I did run a little bit of color into those stars, okay? So there's kind of a muted look. There's not this strong lighting in here going from complete white to black, okay? It's more of a, I don't know, like a 5% tone over those stars in there. So in contrast with this one right here, where I've retained some of the white beams, okay? So I thought that afforded me the ability to go in here and add some strong white highlights on those trees, okay? Strong white highlights on these trees would look out of place, right? Because there isn't that you know, similar lighting within the scene, okay? And what I'm doing is I'm talking about selective coloring that I was talking about in the previous Stamp Along video, where it's about the retention of some of these lighter areas, okay? So you can see in a finished scene where that comes into play right here. This one I ran a little bit of tone over. There's a little bit of white of the card, but I ran a little bit of muted blue in here. So what that allowed me to do is add in some of the pigment ink that I do in this video over the tops of some of these areas and over the tops of some of these clouds in here, giving this a really soft, kind of illuminated feel to this scene right here. So anyways, sun, moon, stars. I mean, we have a lighthouse in here, but kind of, I think, for me, this scene is more about the mood, and that's what I'm kind of focused on. You know, the lighthouse is certainly an important feature in here, and it's very prominent, but it's the mood in each one of these, I think, that's kind of the overall, the kind of the foundational draw of each one of these, more than it is a lake or something like that. It's the mood that this sets right here, you know. It puts us into that position, or it puts us into the scenes and creates somewhat of an emotional tie with what we're stamping out. So remember, when doing these types of things right here, still retain some of those lighter areas of your, whatever your light source is, and those three things, or those, in this case, you know, the sun, the moon, and the stars in this one, those ones really set the tone of the overall, okay? So again, going back to the Stamp Along video, selective shading, okay? Bring your, you know, your more vibrant, darker tones into the darker areas, the shadows and whatnot. But remember, even when you're coming in with those darker tones, be careful that you don't put them, you know, you don't want that tone of blue as an oval shape right smack dab in the middle of your lighter areas right there, or something of that sort, okay? So anyways, if you watched this video, I hope you enjoy it. I had a really fun time finishing these scenes off and taking them from kind of more of a muted intensity, you know. I mean, that's a pretty bright blue right there, but this is the same blue that this one had before. And I just wanted to kind of alter it a little bit and change it around, so I added more of those aqua, green, turquoise-y types of tones into this area, just to differentiate it from this one right here. And plus, I did that because I'd been doing so many just blue scenes of late, so I wanted to kind of warm that up to change it a little bit. But I like what's going on in all these things right here, and adding in those extra colors into the scenes really brought these out into kind of more of a jewel-toned finishes. And when you do that, when you add in those extra layers of colors, the foundation layers, this one was more of a brighter yellow in here, it can create this color glow. And when we're talking about sky features like that, we want to give the illusion that the light is coming from within the scenes. And that's how you do that. You just add a lot of those lighter tone under features, okay? And don't just kind of keep your darker tones for the perimeters of the card. So they look like little sparkly, well, not sparkly, kind of glowing, I don't know, entities, you might say, windows into a different world, right, that have their own light sources, okay? And that's the fun thing about sky figures, is you have these light sources. Now, what do we do with the light sources, you know, and how do we make them kind of pop and glow? And this is one way to do that, okay? Thanks again for tuning in, and hope you enjoy the video. Okay, we've just finished 6 different kind of variations on sky figures. And for those that know me, if you've seen any of these videos before, or a few of them, if I've kind of completed, or if I've achieved a certain, I don't know, degree of finish on a certain part of a scene or whatnot, I tend to go back and kind of finish them off to where I think I don't know, the card makes a little bit more of a full statement. Okay, I didn't just finish these. I finished these earlier today, and I've been looking at them a couple times. And you know, when I get something like to this stage of a scene, I get this real itch to finish these off in some form or another. I don't have any real definitive plan here, but I do think I could make, you know, a more complete statement, you know, a scenic stamping statement out of some of these scenes right here. And I thought maybe I'd do a little bit of experimentation with some, and I don't know, see where that takes me or gets me to, as far as some of these go. All right, now this one right here is warm tone scene, of course. Well, warm tone sky, and I'm not going to turn this into something like a winter scene or something like that, but I think we can push this warm sky a little bit further in terms of what exists right now. I'm not really sure what I'll do, but if I do put some, you know, on all of these, because I have, you know, a certain degree of kind of, I don't know what's the term I'm looking for, kind of a resolved sky figure. I can't put certain things down into the scene. Like, I couldn't put this cabin or something like that, right? I can't just stamp that cabin right over the top there, because we'll see that moon cloud showing right through here, okay? If I wanted to do this, and if I wanted to have that in there, I'd have to stamp it out first, mask it off, and then stamp in that sky around it or above it, you know, in this case. But I can put things like darker objects, more of a silhouette type of object. I'm not sure about this one right here. There's some open areas on that rock. But I thought I would play around with these. I just kind of pulled these out. I don't know if I'm going to use them or not. But you'll notice all of these types of images have something in common in that they're very solid. I have some other unmounted stamps as well that I can use. Maybe some of the pine trees or the leafless pines, or, you know, that type of thing. But I don't know. We don't have to plan everything out too far in advance. I better start thinking about it soon if it's going to be in this video. But I thought I would work on this kind of color scheme a little bit more. Now this had a little bit of a chance to sit and dry a little bit where we have a nice little glow working in here, right, with that yellow. But around in the perimeter, I kind of completed kind of a more of a brownish tinged scene, or tone scene. And I thought I would push that a little bit more. Let's make this kind of breathe and look a little bit more kind of exciting as a statement, kind of a lighting statement. Okay, now this is just your number 5 yellow. It's just a straight yellow from Marvy. Okay. And kind of going back in here a little bit more, adding more of this tone. It's, as we can see, I don't think it's going to be a subtle scene. It's probably going to be very vibrant by doing this. This is an example of going back in and kind of adding a certain degree of intensity to the scene. And you can go back, as long as you've retained some lighter areas, you can go back to a light color and just put it right over the darker colors. It doesn't make it a lighter surface though. It's making it a little bit darker, but it's making it more intense. Now I still want that sun to be, to be my light source, so I'm being careful not to tone over it, okay? I still want it to kind of pop and stand out. So I'm bringing some of this tone kind of close to it, but not toning it all out, okay? Kind of looks a little bit more vibrant now and alive, right? Okay. Let's see, let me try to get a little bit of this color in here. I'm just going with a very kind of dry brush touch. Remember, like in that last video, it's about kind of building up your tones in a nice gradual fashion. Not really on the outside because it was so dark, and I know I'm going to go for a pretty full saturation of it out there so I can apply it in mass, you know. But when you start getting around your lighter tones, your lighter areas, you know, kind of exercise a little bit of restraint, you know, so we don't just tone out all of our light, okay? And I think that looks pretty good. Now let's go and let's try, how about a rose pink or something like that? Let's give it a try here. I don't know if it really reads very much. I don't see too much. Okay. It's not too much of a change. Okay. I can see this pad's in need of a change itself very soon. Luckily I have some of those demo pads and they're much newer than these, so if I, let me see, the red, my two pinks, my two very light pinks are in need of a change, so I'm going to grab one of those. If I still have a bunch of them up on the eBay site, but if I've saved one, I hope I saved one of each of these ones because it looks like I'll need it. Actually, it's time that I get some of those blank pads too, and I should show them in this video, how to ink them up and utilize them. It's just a matter of inking up and making your own colored pad out of a blank pad and re-inker of the same color. This is a little bit more brown. I've used this before, okay? But just want to make it a little bit more vibrant and rich, okay? Well, this is the number 18 dark brown. Ooh, that's pretty dark, but let's go ahead and utilize that in here. See what it looks like. I think it looks pretty good. It's darker, so I'm going to keep it more on the perimeter a little bit more. And if you want, some of those tonal changes in terms of value, all right? Be careful with the darker colors. Kind of, again, use a little bit of restraint and don't tone out all of your light with the medium and darker tones, okay? Okay, I think that looks pretty good. It certainly changed the spirit of it, didn't it? Especially that number 5 yellow, that nice bright yellow. All right, now what should we do to it? Boy, you can almost do a quote stamp over the top of it in white ink or something like that, or you can emboss a quote in front of that with some statement on the sun, perhaps. Lighthouse. I don't think so. But the Lakeside Cove. Interesting. No, I think like that. Tempting. Tempted. Sold. Okay. It's going to have to be dark. I'm going to take my black pad and I'm going to put a little bit of ink on it because it's going to have to be pretty dark, because that's already a pretty dark, rich background that we have there, okay? So, Lakeside Cove Large. There are some open areas on the Lakeside Cove, small and large, both versions. But I'm not worried about it too much because it's just these rocks in here, and if I get some of that pattern in these rocks, I don't think it looks too bad. Alright, so what I did here was I inked up for the most part out there, and I didn't ink up too much around here or on the bottom. Now remember how we kind of wiped off some of the area around our sky figures? Let's do the same thing on this area down here, this tone where it ends. Right at the bottom of this stamp. Okay, so I've wiped a lot of this off in the interior here. Okay? Alright. Be easier if I was doing this with probably a clear acrylic stamp. I'm kind of aiming that sun to be right in here or so. If I'm off by a little bit, then so be it. Pretty good. Not too bad. We have the sun kind of peeking out from behind the clouds now. Or behind the trees, sorry. Peeking out from, well, I guess it is peeking out from behind the clouds, but it's also behind the trees. Alright, so we have that. And I think it looks pretty good. I do want to do something to this scene, though. I want to anchor that Lakeside Cove down a little bit more, but I just know that that black ink is very, very wet right now, so if I do it right now, I'm going to smear it. And plus, I've just stamped that Lakeside Cove over the top of a pretty saturated surface, so it's like stamping wet on wet. In fact, over here, I kind of pulled it off a little bit too soon. I didn't allow the ink to transfer fully. No big deal. But there you have it. It's a little bit more of a complete statement, though, wouldn't you think? Or wouldn't you say? From where it was before. But that wasn't the point of that last video. You know, the point wasn't to do complete scenes. It was to do, you know, kind of the general concept of sky figures. Okay, let's see here. This would really go well with a lightning stamp coming from above, and if you have that coming from below, huh? Maybe. Let's hold on a bit. Let me think about that one. All right. Another step done on that card. Well, I guess it's a couple steps. A little bit more ink saturations. All right. Let's take a look at this one. I love big dramatic moons kind of rising behind different objects. Alright, we have the same thing kind of going on with this scene right here. It needs a little bit more of a kick of, I guess, intensity, vibrancy, etc., etc. Alright, so let's go back to some of our other inks here. I'm going to hit it with some Marvy inks. Marvy inks tend to be a little bit more intense. Sometimes they're almost too bright, you know, or I like a kind of combination of different brands of inks. But I tell you what, this is really dry now because I stamped it much earlier today. Let's do something on this one too. I have blue over here, and I've been doing a lot of blue scenes lately. Let's change the spirit of this one a little bit and kind of move it into kind of more of a blue-green color scheme. So we'll be introducing an element of warmth, okay, as we move into the greens. Well, I don't know, a little bit. It still might be a cool scene in terms of the temperature, but, well, let's see what we get to. Okay, I just said that because I looked at this right over here, and it's Caribbean blue, meaning it's a little bit greenish, you know, in terms of a tinge. Let's take a look and see what that looks like. Well, it's not too warm, but it's nice, isn't it? It's kind of a bright blue. It's kind of like one of those Marvy pads that I didn't really use too much because it wasn't in my kind of workshop kit that I used to take around. This was one of those colors that kind of came out after. I think there were an initial 30 pads or something like that, and I kind of established my workshop kit with those pads, and then much later they came out with maybe about 10 more colors or something like that from their ink pen line. And Caribbean blue was one of them. It's really nice. I don't know. Boy, that sure looks like the number 10 blue to me. It's a little bit different in spirit, but not by too much. Yeah, it's a little bit more green. I guess, but when I lay it down over the top of all these other blues, it kind of looks like the number 10 blue to me. Okay, but let's still go in and change the spirit here. Okay, I don't have to do it just one color, okay? I can add other colors to it. Yeah, it does look a little bit more, I don't know, aqua in spirit. It's almost looking like the colors looks like, I don't know, something that you might see like underwater or something like that. But the visibility isn't that great, you know, but it's still there, light and whatnot. Okay, let's try some other tones of green. If you have kind of a, I don't know, you could be stamping along with me if you want to. But what you do is you just apply another tone of blue to your scene, and if you have some light greens or something like that, like this one right here is called pale green. Oh, you can have a light green or something like that, or a yellow green even. It'll change it much faster and more extreme with something like that, but if you don't have any of those, what you can do, take the green that you have, even if it's, you know, fairly dark green, blot it off a few times, okay, where it becomes much drier, so that when you apply it, in a sense, you're not going to be applying that hue, but you'll be applying a much lighter green than what's inherently in the ink pad itself, you know, in terms of that value and hue of green, okay? It just means that there's just a little bit more control over it. Remember, we kind of, you know, we build things up kind of at a slower pace, you know, if possible. And if you can't do it with an existing hue, then alter the color that you have a little bit by just applying a drier version of it. Okay, this is the green here, and see, it's kind of, I don't know, it's an analogous color to blue. So what we have is when you put two, you know, analogous colors next to each other, what it does is it creates a color glow. All right. Now you don't need to know any of that or anything like that, but it does seem like it's glowing to me a little bit. You know. I think, what was it? I think complementary colors on the color wheel next to each other create a color vibration or something like that, or placed next to each other. Analogous colors are a color glow. So, you know, not that anyone needs to know that. I'm just looking around at my table. Here's some bamboo leaves, okay? That was just sitting there. I'm going to try that one. If I don't know what it's going to look like, try it in a little section and see if you like it, you know? I'm applying it in a dark area so that it isn't quite so abrupt an application because I'm applying it in a dark area, but you can kind of get the gist of something, of what it might look like if you apply it in an area, and certainly if you apply it in a dry brush kind of application. Looks pretty good actually, where I'm applying it. In some of the lighter areas, it looks more of like a yellow-green. I think that looks kind of nice. I guess it is kind of giving me that warmth, okay? It wasn't like the warmth that I sought, you know, okay, it just happened. I didn't know it was gonna, I wasn't thinking about that, but, you know, this is just kind of an experiment. You know, when you experiment around, it could be an experiment gone bad, you know, that's entirely possible. But, you know, in the process of doing that, if something goes bad, hey, you know, the way I look at it when I'm doing it, I got a lot of entertainment out of it. It was fun, you know. Stamping should be fun, and it shouldn't be kind of a precarious exercise. That's not what we do any of this for. You know, we go into it to have fun. To me, I go into it to have fun, but, you know, if I learn something in the process, it's really a bonus. You know, it kind of resonates with me a little bit longer, you know, as far as that scene goes. Those are the scenes that I tend to remember longer than others. You know, the other ones could be just like a, you know, an hour escape, you know, into kind of the landscape that you've created. But the ones that where I've done kind of a different technique or something new has come out, it's always where I'm kind of experimenting, where, you know, at some point sometimes it feels like it's, you know, not only going off the rails, but maybe it has gone off the rails, and I kind of have to work it and work it and work it and kind of bring it back. And I don't know, in that process you might kind of learn something new, and that's when, oh, you know, it's a really great experience. They say that you're only really happy when you're learning. Now, I'm just like everyone else. I think we all have a tendency of kind of finding what really works for us, and just, you know, we tend to work it, and, you know, that's great too. But every now and then, you know, you kind of have to step out of that comfort zone and kind of try something new. And I think most of us stampers and crafters are very much into that spirit, you know, because unlike in the art world, you know, people tend to stick with like one medium. They're an oil painter for the most part, or something like that. They might do other things too, but you know, us in crafting world, I don't know, we're always interested in the newest things, right? What's new? What was new at the show, you know what I mean? What did you see? What did you learn, you know what I mean? And that's always a great kind of energy to be around. Alright, now I'm adding some deeper, darker clouds in here. I'm doing it with the Prussian blue, okay? I needed to do it with, you know, a fairly dark blue. And look at that dimension that that gives, okay? It'll get toned in later as well, but look at the depth that that brings. It's kind of like that one right there where I added those darker clouds in there, okay? So it's like this is one of those examples of, you know, scenic stamping really is, it's a forgiving process, you know, in terms of stamping something out. If you make a mistake like with a, I don't know, like a birthday card or something like that, where, you know, we end up covering it up or something like that, or, you know, you're stamping a word stamp or something like that, and something, you know, fails in it. Well, I don't know, some people could say, well, that's what we have stamp positioners for, Kevin, but in this one right here, you know, I mean, it, you know, that there was something lost up here with all that tone. I have the richness of tone, but I did lose a lot of that texture, so all you have to do is just go back in here and just add that object back into it, but in a darker form. But it not only kind of recovers the texture a bit in there, but it enhances it through the use of value and creating more depth. If, say, someone messed up here on the side or something like that, and they didn't like it at all, I always say one of the oldest kind of gimmicks, you know, for us scenic stampers is we just cover it up with a tree or something like that. But what would a tree do in there? It would give it more depth, right, by having a darker object closer to us. So all of those little things like that, I don't know, they you know, it works for us. Okay, now remember that aspect of kind of wiping off the perimeter, okay? Let's see here, I'm going to do this side right here. Okay, something like that. It looks a little bit blotchy, but what we'll do is we'll go in here and add some additional tone around it, okay? But that sure looks different, though, than before, doesn't it? I guess that's the difference right here, you know. I do the kind of the stamp-alongs, and we kind of stop, I don't know, I think they look pretty good, but then we stop at some point in time. And I don't know, just the other videos that I'm doing that aren't necessarily stamp-alongs, but they could very well be. These aren't new techniques that I'm doing on here, or more advanced techniques. I just add more color, maybe, to, I don't know, kind of a longer, what is it, a longer time frame card, okay? Now this needs to go in, we need to go back in here and add some additional tones in here. This would look great with some other types of foliage or something like that, or I can have some trees coming in like this, like we're looking up, you know, like laying on our backs and looking up at the moon. I don't know, a lot of possibilities there still. It almost looks like, you know, that looks pretty cool too, doesn't it? You know, having the moon kind of peeking out from underneath those clouds right there, or you know, there's just some clouds around there, and not so much. That looks good. That doesn't look too bad either, does it? It looks strange, right? These two, but it does look, I would say that it looks kind of more dramatic almost that way. That's one good thing about the sky backgrounds, doing them like that. After you get through all the tones, you can kind of reassess and say, okay, this is the way I stamped it out, with the idea of it being like that, but what looks better to you, you know, in terms of the possibilities. And there are some, you know, some distinct possibilities with that one. All right, now, I don't know if I want to do that with all of these, you know, but yeah, let's go with this different one right here, okay. I really like that. But it's looking a little bit flat to me, okay. Now, if I sprayed this, there would be a much more vibrant overall look to it, okay. And that's the way a lot of these brands of inks kind of dry. It doesn't make them bad, okay, because one of the great equalizers to all of these different brands of inks in terms of achieving kind of a very deep, rich surface is just spraying them. And one of the things you can do too is, if you're finding, you have to kind of experiment around with it. I find that most sprays kind of bring back the vibrancy of saturation of a freshly stamped image, or colored scene, I should say, card. You might spray them before they dry, or just do a little bit of experimentation, There's all kinds of different sprays out there, but most of them I find work pretty well in terms of the retention of brightness, you might say. Okay, I'm going back in here with some of this pale violet. Okay, this is the color that I stamped out those star clusters in the previous video. But I just want to reintroduce that. See how dark it is? Okay, it's not really well, I guess it is. It does look like it's making it darker, but I did make this darker than this. It's dried dull. And that's just after a few hours, okay? So I'm just going back in here and reestablishing that kind of moist surface with this, okay? Now if I let this dry again, chances are I might kind of lighten it again and dry it a little bit duller. Well, let's just add this in here like so. All right. Okay. Stars in the sky, right? It's not looking too dynamic to me, so I tell you what, this isn't like a commercial for this cloud Cumulus, but I think it can add to it, just like the water pattern stamp is kind of the, very basic pattern for adding in textures in water scenes. The sedge filler is a good kind of basic pattern for filling in areas around grassy areas and meadows. You can, like I said, you can even use it for sand dunes or something like that, or snow if this is all blue. Yeah, it has a little bit of a grassy texture, but you can, in theory, use it that way. But what I'm getting at is this, I always saw this cloud as kind of the basic cloud texture to kind of unify things up in sky areas, okay? And it has a lot of different characteristics to it in terms of the colors that you stamp it out in. If you stamp it out in something very light, it could look billowy and soft, okay? And if you stamp it out in something like black, it could have a much more dramatic feel to it, right? Okay? All right, now on this one right here, we're looking at a very dark sky, okay? Or background, or whatever it is right now. So it's going to have to be fairly dark. Let's go ahead and use this Prussian blue again. You might try something out in black or something like that too, okay? Black would be interesting. Okay. Adding this in. Remember that whole thing about kind of blotting off the edge? I think that looks kind of neat. It's a little bit more translucent, okay? Where I normally wouldn't go for something like that if I'm starting it off, but this is kind of like, it's like ad-libbing, all right? It's doing things kind of on the spot. We're just kind of making things up as we go, using what we have, or using what we've been dealt, and trying to do something with it, so it's a little bit of an experiment. But we see some of those cloud textures, star textures showing through. And that's just fine. Okay, see what that's doing? It's kind of creating a bank of clouds closer to our eye. The clouds are, they represent something in the distance, but in this case, because they are much closer than stars, in a sense, these clouds are becoming the foreground. That is until later when we add something else, if we do, okay? But wouldn't that be a great kind of a statement for some sort of a quote stamp on stars or the night sky or something like that? Okay, now the stars, or the clouds, are being kind of bottom lit if this sat like that. So if I stamp another cloud up here, see the the lighter areas are on the top there, they're going to have to go like that to be bottom lit. So I've wiped off this portion right here so that dark area is not defining that edge anymore, okay? So wipe it off pretty good, especially because we're going with a pretty dark color here, okay? And look how fun that is up there. It really changed the kind of the overall spirit of this scene, didn't it? You know, it looks quite different. We covered up a huge amount of the background, okay? And there were stars in there, but what does it do? I think it made the remaining stars look even brighter and more twinkly, and I don't know, they became much more of a focal point that way. So I think in doing that, it really brought out the stars more than it kind of suppressed them in terms of the coverage of it, or the overlapping of certain ones, okay? The other ones were kind of dark anyway, but I mean, look at this right here. That has a little bit of light showing through because I've left some of that light in there, but just those little details like that, you know? Kind of that little glowing area in the background. See down here, that cloud is being illuminated. It's a little bit lighter over here too. And that comes back to that point about oscillating your lights and darks, leaving some light, some areas dark, okay? And that even comes into play, like right here, after you've covered it up with a very dark cloud and all those tones running underneath there. That little variation there, I think, really works. And same thing right here. It's much darker over here and over here, but we have this lighter area right here. Okay? That's that oscillation. So the thing about, you know, creating and controlling light and defining light within a scene is just leaving some areas lighter than others, okay? So you have a kind of a value range within all the given areas of a scene. Remember, you can always go back in and tone something. If it's just too light, you can always add more color even after you've stamped everything over it. I can go back in and add more light blue over it or something like that. Or I don't like how light that is. Then you can tone it out. It's just like if you're a cook and you've added too much salt to something, it's just like you can't really take the salt out. You can add a potato or something like that to soup, they say, or something of that sort, but it's always just easier to kind of leave it out and to add those things in later, as you'll have a choice. Okay, this is going to be really fun. I think this will open up some, there's plenty of things we can do in here with different textures, you know, like the white gel pen and things like that. I don't know, we can play around here with I don't know, maybe some patterns or something like that. I feel like doing some kind of unconventional, for me, things with some of these things. I was thinking about having some kind of like a, you know, like lens flares in here. I'm not sure if I can do that or not. I don't know, we'll try to do that. I'll try to do a lens flare or some kind of version of it and try to get really bold with some of my, I don't know, visual statements. Okay, this one's gonna be really fun. I can add some. Which way's up and which way's down with this one? I'm leaning towards that. What do you think? I think that looks okay too. Imagine some trees or something like that in here. This, I don't like this way too much, you know. I can add some more tone in here and see, but a little bit open right here. I feel like I'm going to fall out that, you know, it looks like something's pouring out and just pouring out of the scene, but right here it seems like I'm contained in here, you know. It's like pillows or something like that. So, you know, I kind of rest in here. I'm not flowing out of the scene. It's like the feng shui of scene stamping or something like that. Actually, this way looks like a head or something like that. On this one, if I had it like this, I would call it the, and it looks like the head of a seahorse or something like that. I'd call it the seahorse and no one would know what I'm talking about. Okay, now, oh boy. this really invites something. I'm not sure if I want to do it when we already have all these 3 other scenes right here. And I feel that I have enough to work on here with these ones. I don't know, I can always do this other black and white one in a later video, but look at the vibrancy now, huh? Aren't those fun? Look at my cardstock's really bowing. I love this paper, but this is 10-point paper. 12-point doesn't bow as much. Not that the bowing hurts it or something like that, but I wish these were a little bit thicker. I bought out a ton of King James because I loved it so much, and I don't know, it's kind of one of my things. I tend to, whenever I find out something's been discontinued, if I really like it, and it's part of my repertoire, I tend to buy a lot of it, so I have a lot of 10-point paper stock. Alright, I'm going to have to wait for these ones to dry and come back into it. Let me see here. Yeah, that's still a little bit wet. I really did add some deep saturations down here. Alright, so I'll give it a little bit of time, come back to it, and have more fun. I really love kind of seeing scenes kind of start to kind of come into their own, you know, and I think these ones are starting to do that now in terms of more of a complete statement of, I don't know, whatever it is we're looking for here. And I don't really know what it is, but we'll figure it out as we go along here. And this really can use some patterns or something like that. I'm thinking about some sort of whimsical patterns that could very well destroy it. So I don't know. We'll play around with that though and test it out. Okay, a little bit of drying time. Okay, I wasn't gone for too long, probably about 10 minutes or so. Just allowing these to set up a little bit. I'm kind of excited about these, so I don't know, normally I might give it a little bit more time to kind of just set up a little bit and establish themselves in terms of settling. I think that some of these inks still might be a little bit wet. I'm testing it right now and trying to figure that out. Okay. This object right now, the Lakeside Cove Large, has shading in the design, okay? But it's floating in here a little bit, okay? There's not very much opacity to those rocks. So what I'm doing is I'm going in, kind of like with this touch right here, okay? And that's right here and here, to create a little bit of opacity. And what I mean by that is I'm coloring some of those rocks, and I have it at a bit of an angle like that, just so I'm not doing the entire rock. I might leave kind of the tops of the rocks a little bit lighter so that it looks like they're being top lit, okay? So you can use this. Now, right now, what I'm doing on, let me see if I can zoom in here. What I'm doing is right along this water line right here, I'm doing this type of thing, okay? Now see how light that is, okay? It's kind of a dry brush technique, but that's all I'm doing right there. It's not even perfect because it doesn't have to be, because I'm doing it over the tops of all this texture in here. But what I'm doing is it makes that water line, those rocks, kind of sit in the water a little bit more by establishing some shadows underneath it, okay? Alright, now those objects are casting a shadow. I might do it on some of these rocks here as well, creating a little bit of variation, okay? And all those rocks in the background are fairly light, so what I can do is I can put some tone on some and leave others as is, okay? We can also do this with things like the alcohol pens, you know, or if you have Le Plumes or Tombos or just any kind of fine line pens. Copic markers would be good. Alright? So that has kind of established a little bit of visual weight to the object now, the Lakeside Cove. I'll give this one a little bit more of a shadow down here. Okay. And let's deepen the shadows yet a little bit more with the use of the dark brown. Okay. Sometimes you have to get those objects in there to figure out where, you know, some additional shadows are going to be. Now that we have the placement of the main object. Okay. See how that kind of has the Lakeside Cove sitting in the water a little bit more. I notice every time this is... See, this kind of wants to dry off and it wants to go dull, but this is how it looks kind of wet, you know. I'll show you what I mean. I'll add some of this wet dark brown up here, you know, or fresh dark brown or whatever. It's wet and fresh, but I'll show you how kind of vibrant that becomes, okay? And that's what spraying. Spraying will make it look like this, okay, rather than this, okay? The Marby inks aren't the ones that are doing it. It's the other brands that kind of dry that way on certain types of papers, okay? Doesn't mean they're bad. Just spray them when you're done, and it should kind of regain or reinvigorate the saturations and whatnot of the inks as they look when they're wet on this paper. Okay, so anyways, adding that in, kind of creating a little bit of a stronger vignette. It's kind of bringing more of the attention right to that light source though, isn't it? The sun becomes incrementally lighter by contrast, the darker, and you know, the incrementally darker it becomes on the perimeter. Okay? Look how warm that is, and look how vibrant that sun is in there now. Okay? Boy, you don't want to do too much with this one, you know. That makes for a statement, but I've made that statement before. I want to do something different. Maybe we won't do too much with it, though. Okay, we'll add, you know, some light beam, not beams, but some flares. I don't know. Maybe on that one, maybe not. Well, I guess that's the only one, because that's the only sunny one that I'm kind of working on right now. Alright, let me use this Leafless pine stamp. Okay. I have my bare rubber here on my gigantic tack and peel covered acrylic block. Now, I'm going to put another tree right here just to give it some stability, so when I stamp this out, it's not rocking, and again, I don't want that tack and peel sticking to my paper really at any point in time, but especially at this point in time when I'm kind of nearing the end, at least as far as the imagery goes and color saturations. I mean, if it does stick to it, it just kind of peels right off, but it sometimes kind of bends the paper a little bit more. So anyways, that's why I put on that. Okay, let's see. A little bit of foreground with this, just done in black ink. Okay. Can't see it too much, but I will reiterate it over here. On this side of the lake, there was a wildfire at some point in time. Or maybe there was an abundance of water at this point in time and it has now submerged the trees on this side of the lake, thus kind of killing them. Okay. There's quite a bit of ink down here, so that's why I'm kind of allowing that ink to transfer a little bit longer than I normally would if I'm stamping on a blank piece of paper, you know, in the beginning. Okay. See that? Boy, I think that looks pretty dramatic. To me it looks like I don't know, I wasn't really thinking of one thing or another, but to me it looks like sunrise to me. I just envisioned this fisherman right in here, you know? It's like daybreak. Perfect Father's Day card though, huh? That'll look okay too. Let's do this one here. Okay. I think what I'm going to do is I've inked up this. This is the Wading Fisherman, W-A-D-I-N-G. Not waiting, but, well, I guess he could be waiting for a fish, but the stamp's called Wading Fisherman, and I'm going to wipe off the bottom of this a little bit, just so it kind of transitions into that water a little bit more gracefully, because we have a lot of nice things going on right here. Okay, I'm going to put this guy right out here. Don't smash down the fishing pole. Don't put too much pressure around that little fish. Oops. Yeah, I gotta pull out a little bit. Okay. What a perfect setting, huh? Some of you might know someone that would like to be out there in that setting, doing exactly what that person's doing, so. I don't know. I wouldn't mind. I really don't do too much fishing these days, but I tell you what, if I did, that certainly wouldn't be a bad place to be doing it in. Here's some birds if you want to up in the sky, you know, these gulls or whatever. Flock. It's not the gulls, that's a different stamp. But that would be kind of interesting. You know, sometimes you see birds, or maybe the ducks in formation up here would be kind of interesting. That might be something that I'd want to use up there. I was talking about solar flare. I don't know if I want to do that now. That looks really tranquil. I don't know if I want to take the chance of making it too busy. I'm trying to think if I want to do anything to this. And that's kind of rare for me. But it sure looks nice, especially when it's really wet like that. And I know some of you at home are saying, "Yeah, don't do anything. Hold, put on the brakes. It looks fine. Don't ruin it." That's what you're thinking. And I'd have to admit, I'm not really thinking that, but it wouldn't be too much, different than that. Boy, I don't know. I could do some subtle things in here. All right. Anyways, that's I'm thinking out loud there, and those types of thoughts do go through my mind. But let's look at this one right now. Okay. I hate to tell you this, but I'm kind of thinking the same thing on this one. I'm thinking, I don't know. I kind of like that. Maybe that is being different for me, not putting all that stuff on all over it, I don't know if that's really stretching, though. No. Wouldn't be bad, though, would it? It would fill in those that window and light up there. See if I put that in there. And I'd have to kind of reestablish it with like a white gel pen. I would have to go and draw in that white back into those areas again. But maybe not. Spruce tree. I mean, those leaflet trees would be really perfect in here as well, but I don't know. I don't want to do that same thing that I just did in this one down here, do I? Could. They would look good in there. Combination of both. That's really tempting. Kind of have it coming in like that at an angle, like you're looking up, and kind of the trees are going back in perspective. I've done it before, but it does seem like it would be a good scene to do that in. So let's just do it. All right. I had my desk really cleared off beautifully. It's not like that anymore after a few scenes. But I got some good scenes out of it, though. Who cares about a cluttered desk, right? Okay. I was thinking about this right here. Like this. Like the taller trees were kind of, a little bit more established. And the older trees, kind of the taller ones, have been killed due to, lightning strikes, whatever. Okay. So we'll go a little bit taller with the leafless pines. Okay. No, that sure looks good to me. Alright, let's see. This is the spruce. Okay, I might go with... Now, there's the pine tree. It's a little bit more spindly. I'll tell you what. Let's mix and match, alright? Let's go with let's go with this one right here, maybe? And when I do go camping and hiking and whatever, there's not just one type of tree in a given area. You know, there's often, I don't know, 3 or 4 types within a given forest, at least where I'm going hiking. So you can kind of mix and match. Not that this, you know, the pine tree could be, a form of this spruce right here, but I was thinking about a different tree. Kind of the pine tree. Let me pause here and get a different one. Maybe go for like a trio of different types of shapes. Okay, this one right here. Okay, I have the right to change my mind. I don't like that. Let's go back to this one right here. The spruce. I have a smaller version of it. Maybe? Let me see what this is going to look like here. No, I think that looks pretty good. I'm just generally kind of aiming these in an imaginary vanishing point and kind of pointing them at it. I'm not going to do it like an official, vanishing point, but it'll be kind of approximate, It's like right there. I'm kind of aiming it a little bit. Yeah, like something like that. I'm doing another one on this side so that it'll be 5. I like kind of the arrangement in terms of kind of a compositionally an odd number of things I think works a little bit better. I don't know, for some reason, psychologically and visually, psychologically, whatever. Anyway, all right. It's different, isn't it? You had those trees in there. It's a lot different than just the kind of star pattern that we just started off with before we started adding all these other things on here. But all I did was add a few clouds around. I mean, I put some more tones in here, but adding those clouds in there is the same thing that we did in the stamp along, right? If you can do this, that was stamp along. And all I did was I added it around the existing stars in here. What do we have right here? There's just 5 impressions, 3 of the same thing in black ink, okay? I don't see this as being like an advanced card, okay? I just did a couple more steps on here. A little bit more tone, another layer of clouds, and then another layer of trees in here, okay? But look how dimensional that is. Doesn't that look like a much deeper visual statement, okay? That used to be the foreground because that was the only thing up there. I mean, that wasn't really the point of the scene. It was showing how to use sky figures, but adding that in there, now we have something closer to us, and then we've added this in here, and now we have something much closer to us than certainly clouds, however far they would be. I don't know, whatever, 50,000 feet, high or something like that. Something up there might be kind of interesting, or the stars themselves maybe should just be the focal point of this scene, right? But isn't that fun? Alright, let's see what we have here. Okay. It's kind of nice in terms of visual statement. No. Maybe. I'm still leaning towards, that kind of configuration. Okay, we have those clouds in there. They look a little bit blobby. So I'm going to go in here and just add a little bit more tone around in here in the same ink that I stamped those clouds in, just to kind of blend them together a little bit more. And again, this is the Prussian blue, okay, the number 29 Marvy. It's very dark. If you have an Adirondack pad, like the denim would be a good choice. You can even use black if you want to. If it doesn't seem to be getting dark enough, you can go ahead and go to black if you want. But remember, kind of light touches, okay? This is what I'm doing right here, like this. See that transition? Going from kind of a little bit darker to lighter like that. And I'm staying in one area, okay? I'm not trying to do it like this, okay? So remember to keep that kind of motion going. See, I'm kind of working that one area, and I'm doing it very lightly, okay? Through repetition, and that way you'll have a lot of control over it, about what's happening on the scene, you know? You're in complete control over it because you're really never applying a lot of ink at any given time. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You're applying very little ink at any given time, alright? It's like if you're driving a car at 20 miles an hour and something comes up, you know, you can kind of see something coming up a lot, you know, farther off, or, you know, in terms of time. But if you're going much, much faster, there's just, you know, there's less of a window to stop your progress. I always say this isn't like calligraphy or something like that. Or it doesn't have to be. It could be. Some people are kind of much more of an expressionistic, you know, style of stamper, and there is something to be said for that, because there's a lot of gesture and kind of movement and energy, you know, but I don't know, it's a little bit precarious, you know, to say the least. You know what? I really like that Prussian blue. This scene right here, let's do that here too, okay? Let's go and add it a little bit to the corners, tipping the edges, okay? For lack of a better term. Is that just working one part at a time, one corner at a time? Looks pretty good, I'd say. Remember that whole concept, one step darker, one value darker, somewhere in the scene, and the lighter things will seem one step lighter by contrast. Let me try black. Okay, watch where I'm doing this. See that? Most of it, oops, sorry. Most of it is off the page when I start off, right? It's like this. Okay? And see, when I do this around here, like that, see, can you tell by the amount that's right here just how little I'm on the page like that, okay? And then I blend it in like that, okay? Let's take a look at it again here, okay? Small part on the page. Now I'm using a pretty wet pad, you know, because I just re-inked it. So I don't want to get like a big oval shape sitting in the middle here, so you can see where I start kind of most of it off, and see how I'm kind of working that area like that with a real light touch, and see that whole thing happened right here, and that's what happened right there. That's why I don't get these oval shapes all throughout there. It's kind of just more tapping it in like that, okay? It's kind of nice right out here. It's like these trees are kind of coming from, emerging somewhat from the shadows now down here. See that? Okay, let's do it on here too. Why not? We have the black ink out, and as far as this aspect, or this component, I guess, this component of the scenes can be done all at once. So why don't we do it all at once? See that? How rich it is? And it's just one tiny little corner. See this? When we get to the black, if this is going to be one of the colors, you know, within your toning process, it's not like it's going to be used like it was, like we did the yellow or something like that and used a whole lot of it. It's just one of those dark colors kind of towards the tail end, or at the tail end as far as the color application process. And it's just a little bit of each corner, okay? And it can be quite an effective component of that color scheme, or the value scheme, I should say, to be more accurate. Okay. Did I do that on here? Can't even remember now. You notice how I'm doing it on the top up here, and I'm rotating? It's because this is where my hand naturally falls. If I'm like this, I'm kind of coming like this. I can't really see it as much as I can like this. See, my eyes are coming from this angle. So I can kind of see it easier this way. And my hand, this is my natural position of my hand too. So keep things nice and comfortable for yourself. You want to keep things as comfortable as possible. You want to be able to see what you're doing, okay? And it's not important to be able to have this right side up all the time where I'm doing this, okay? You know, like that, all right? I'm just working one small area, and I'm just going for a little bit of a transition up there. I'm not even thinking about this in terms of a landscape, you know, an upright one or something like that. All right. Pretty deep and rich, huh? I kind of like that. Let's bring a little bit more down here. It's kind of one of those things, it's like, it almost could be like some kind of underwater thing with, you know, if it didn't have the moon. Like, if I had, like, that gone and I had images of kelp or seaweed, I don't think it would look, you know, out of place, you know, in terms of all that sky imagery to be in there. If I put a bunch of fish in here, I think it would look okay. Alright, now I have yet to figure out what I'm doing with this one. I could just do some trees in front of it. No. Boy, I am really tempted to do these. The spruce tree against bold. I'm looking at these other scenes, you know, if I did that, it kind of doesn't work because this one's not a vertical format, but if I did, I might have missed an opportunity here. If I did those trees kind of coming up this way, these three scenes could have been like a triptych. You know, it's like a three composition piece, but they're meant to be kind of displayed together. And the common thread would have been those leafless pines in here. Okay, battery change. Okay, let's see here. Alright, I'd have to admit that I'm having a lot more fun finishing these things off than I thought I would have. And I thought I would have fun. You know what I think it is? I think I've been going with those kind of more minimal pieces lately, so I'm looking at these things, and it's not different than what I've done in the past, but I just haven't done it for like a week or two. So it's like, I'm back home, you know, deep, rich, saturated tones, you know, going from edge to edge. Maybe that's it. This is the, This is kind of interesting. The lone pine tree, the lone twisting pine. Maybe some birds on both sides circling it. Maybe not. Boy. That. This one's a tough one. Not in terms of being able to put something on it. I just... That's kind of interesting. Dare I put that on? With all that stuff going on underneath it already. Okay. It's going to be dark because I have all that other darkness in there already. And it would have been good to stamp this out first. This area down here will not be light because I'm stamping it into a dark area already, okay? But, alright. I have to do it now after I say it. You know, I said that on video, by the way. I feel pressured by you, the viewer. You made... Okay, so if this doesn't come out, you made me do it. Let's just go for it. I don't know, I think that's a... It's not quite so solid an image, you know, so there is a little bit of hesitancy with that. But I think some of those shapes down there could be okay next to it. Okay. And I don't want the moon to be going into this, but kind of having that right next to it like that might be interesting. Let's see how it goes. Now remember, I'm going to have to pull out some of these light areas with the white gel pen and maybe some pigment ink, I'm not sure. Well, let's just see how it goes. I pulled this out for a reason because it is somewhat of a silhouette. But it does have open spaces, like right in here it's lighter, right? To have that light shining on it. But if there's already stuff behind it, it's not going to be light like that, so let's see how it works out. Okay. I'm probably holding this down longer than I need to because I don't think it's very wet back there right now. Just in terms of the bottom portions, but that's not really going to matter. I think the interior section that I'm stamping it on is fairly dry and set up. Okay. Okay. Not too bad. It's fairly light. Okay. Not too bad. In fact, I'm going to have to darken this up a little bit and add more tone in here, but I'll bring that light to life if I can with the use of some pigment inks and whatnot. Okay. We'll put some birds in here. It's called the flock. Okay. Tell you what, I'm looking at that. Let's put ourselves on the shoreline right here as a viewer of the scene. So you and I, whoever's watching this video, if you've made it this far, we are both looking at this scene on the shoreline because I'm placing this foliage here. So now we are standing on solid ground looking out there. And hopefully this will add to kind of the compositional emotional content, I guess. This is the spooky branch, by the way. Go about like so. I can come in here again. I'm not quite sure if I want to, though. Maybe something like that, just to put another piece of that on the side. Okay, about like that. It's small, but you see those branches down there. It's kind of fun. Alright. You know what? I was thinking about adding some other tone using the sorry, I'm moving all these stamps out of the way. I have a gigantic pile of stamps up on my desk again. Okay, I was going to use some tone, like some dye-based inks to run in here. I might just do those with the alcohol pens. I can paint it in there, okay? But in the meantime, and I can see that lighthouse is really quite wet. So are those branches in there. Let's see, where's a good pen here? Alright. Let's just bring this lighthouse to life a little bit. See that? I'm just kind of recovering the light in the lighthouse, okay? like so. Okay. Now we have this moonlight here, and we have these. I just put that image on the ground here, but we have these splashing waves on these rocks down here. I'm being a little bit more calculating with these because it is so dark down there already, so a little splash down there will really kind of show up if I do it in white especially. Okay, it might be more appropriate or more effective to do it in, or more appropriate too, in blue. Okay, blue can be something that's light on dark, but not quite as light as the white, of course. Okay. It's that little area down there. Kind of looks weird right now. Let's see what we can do here. What I'll do is are we ready to do that? I think I'm all ready. Let's go to our bleed-proof white and get a little of that paint. We're going to need some accents, lighter accents, okay, to match those little dots down there. The dots are too kind of isolated in terms of a type of texture they're depicting on that surface. They're the only thing kind of that's light right now, so they really stand out. Okay. I don't paint often, kind of just lately on these scenes right here, so I don't know if this is really painting. I guess it is, but it's like more like, let me call it brush work. I don't do too much brush work, so kind of bear with me here. If someone's a painter, they're probably cringing. Okay, kind of bringing those branches out from the background a little bit. They do look, I think they look more dimensional that way too, by having kind of a highlight on them. Okay, how does that look? Okay. Putting some on this lighthouse, on these rocks. I do still need to add the shading to this lighthouse, okay, but that'll come a little bit later when I'm not dealing with so much wet ink on it, okay. Putting some on tops of these rocks right here. A little bit of highlights, okay. Let's look at some of these clouds. I was saying clouds, and then in the back of my mind I was thinking, do I want to do that? Okay. Okay, let's see. Some of these clouds are kind of capturing some of that moonlight, maybe. There's too much paint in here. I want to go with a little bit more of a dry brushed effect. Okay, let's wipe that off. Start over again. Oh, you can do that? Yeah, you can. Absolutely. It'll just rub right off. Things that I do, at least in terms of rubber stamping, it's not like a precarious thing. Like if I don't like some of these dots down here, if it's too much, okay, watch this, I can just take my finger or a paper towel or something like that. And I don't know if you can see it, but I'm just kind of buffing some of them out. I mean, it'd be better. I don't want to rub in there too much right now because there's wet black ink there as well. Maybe I should have demonstrated that later, but I think you get the point. It'll buff right out, okay? And then I can tone right over it again with some more ink if I want to or whatever. I can spray it and they'll really disappear. Okay. Some of these clouds are capturing, reflecting some of that moonlight a little bit more in the lighter areas, okay? The area where it got kind of darker, you don't add quite so much. And this is kind of dry brushed touch. And it's a little bit, I don't know, I'm getting a little bit more than I want with some of these strokes, but yeah, it kind of looks a little bit more natural in the lighter billows, you know, just because naturally it blends in more that way. But if the billows are light, chances are there'd be more of a highlight on them. So it kind of makes more sense in those areas, even though I did put it on some pretty dark branches just to kind of pull them out from the background a little bit. Okay. The spirit of it is slowly kind of coming into focus a bit. It's kind of changing its character. The more you kind of add little embellishments to it. Okay. kind of adding those same little dot patterns here and there. Not because they make sense or anything like that, but just to give a little bit of continuity between the water and some areas that are just different areas of the scene, I guess. Interesting. In terms of the textures that are just kind of here and there, but the spirit is coming into focus, I would say. Okay. Kind of the most important part of this image, though, is the light, right? Now, let me see. Okay, let me add a little bit of tone in there, just to get it. And we'll create a glow using some pigment ink in there. After that, okay, so I've relit the light, you might say. Okay. Now that we have all that texture in there, I can go in here and add some more. Alright. That's it for that, for now. And then the pigment can give it a little bit more atmosphere. Okay? So let's see what we're looking at right now. Okay, with the imagery placed in there. A little bit more jewel-like and finished, right? So do you remember what these were, you know, when we started, as far as the sky figures? They look quite different, I would say. In a good way, but that's what you can really do with some scenes. Now, I'm working on 3, and I know this is taking forever, but there were a lot of design choices that I was kind of working through, so that kind of slowed me down, and I really didn't have a concept, so when I keep changing around from scene to scene and changing my focus, it slows down the the pace a little bit. But I don't know, doing 3 of these together like that, it does relate to the previous video a little bit more than to just address one at a time, you know. So, I just don't know that I want kind of all that texture up there. I like it kind of diffused like that, I think. And the same thing going with this one, too. I really love kind of these little embellishments in here and doing that type of thing. I can't remember not doing that in quite some time. Maybe on that. No, I did it on this other one, too. I was thinking there was another time I didn't do it, but I just don't think that these things would require much more of a statement in terms of highlights. It's such diffused light in here. I wouldn't have something so stark, you know, shining on some of these like branches like in this one. This one it could stand to use a little bit of a touch here and there, maybe. Possibly with the opaque white, a couple little branches maybe, you know, to be reflecting some of that light might be nice. I don't think it needs it or anything like that, but it might be kind of interesting. But I'm going to give this a little bit of time. I think I'm going to give this a rest right here. I've been stamping for really quite a long time today, so I think I want to wait and take a look at these. Sometimes it's good to check out things with kind of fresh eyes. And plus, I need to wait for this one to dry anyway down here, that black ink up there and on the lighthouse as well, so I can tone in a little bit more in this one and kind of flesh that lighthouse out a little bit more, add a little bit more of a glowing light around that, and possibly some pigment ink applications around here to give it a little bit more atmosphere. Alright, so until then, that was that step, and we'll see what happens in the next one. Okay, I have given some time to these 3 different scenes. The intensity of all of them is holding up pretty good. I don't know, you might have been able to tell if any one of these kind of dulled out, but just that layering with the extra Marvy inks is kind of retaining the intensity without having to spray them. I would still recommend spraying them though, or your scenes, with some sort of sealant, and I just tend to think that that brings out a lot more of the depth of all the colors that you've used. And usually with most brands of inks, things will have kind of a dull sheen to them where they'll kind of flatten out. And it's like staining wood if you kind of put a stain over it, or like a polyurethane coat or something like that. It tends to really bring out the depth of the grain. And it does the same type of thing when you spray cards like this, where you've applied a lot of transparent tones over one another. And that's what dye-based inks are. Okay, now, looking at this one here, I think that one is, I'm about to say a complete statement, not, you know, in need of anything else. In fact, I think putting anything else on that one could potentially detract from the feel of it, you know. Maybe that there just wouldn't be any highlights or something like that on there. I tend to really want to add additional texture to and highlighting to pieces, but I don't know. I like it as is, which is really strange for me. But on this one right here, I think this one could use some additional highlights here and there, and I'm going to keep it somewhat minimal. Okay, let's see, let me try to zoom in here. And I'm going to try to keep the highlights on the sides of some branches that are facing the light, okay? So on some of these branches I have it kind of underlit. And where I go below the branch, they'll be top-lit, okay? See that, how that works? And so I'll get some of these branches on the other side of the tree. It kind of, let me see, I can't forget the trunk. It's a little bit more dimensional, I guess. I wasn't quite sure if it needed it or if it could use it, if it would enhance it. I think it is. I think some of these parts of the tree, at least, were kind of a little bit obscured with kind of what was going on in the background. Okay, now see, I flipped the card because it's easier for me to get on this side of this tree if I just flip it over like that. Okay. Things like this, you can do little dot highlights as well with like a gel pen. I like a little bit, I'm getting to like this, kind of this brush work though a little bit more in terms of kind of more, you know, controlled, subtle marks. You know, and just from the standpoint I can make them a little bit smaller and thinner. I can do some line work. And through a little bit of practice, I'm getting more kind of comfortable with it. Okay. I don't know, what do you think? It's standing out a little bit, so let me put some on the tops of some of these rocks in the background, or in the midground, I guess. I guess that's about right. There, okay. I think the light is bright enough in this scene where those trees can handle that type of reflected light. Okay, I can knock some of it down a little bit just by kind of running my finger over it, and that's kind of removing a little bit of the paint, thus making it a little bit more translucent. Okay, now let's take a look at these two here. I think these two can use a little bit of the kind of diffusing kind of effects of some translucent pigment ink in the form of the color box Frost White. Where is that? Boy. Here we go. Couldn't find my pad. Alright, this is driving me nuts. I need to get some of these pads put back in place. I need room. Okay. Color box, Frost White pigment ink. Not the Brilliance pigment ink, that one dries too fast, okay? Alright, too much, okay? Too much, too much. Getting there. Yeah, I've taken off too much. Okay, but that's kind of what you're going for. Oops. Okay, let me show you what this looks like, okay? So that's 3 tabs and there's barely anything, right? I might have taken off too much, but that's kind of the spirit of what you want here. Okay, now let's take a look at this lighthouse, and let me see if I can kind of create a little bit of a glow around it, okay? So it kind of, you know, creates a kind of a diffusion of the imagery. Oh yeah, I need to color that in a little bit. Okay. Used in that one area. It looks okay, but let's put it also down around some of these clouds. Kind of creating a little bit more of a misty appearance to it. Okay, I need some more ink. This is a good idea. I should show you how much I'm kind of using. So that's a little bit too much. I should have dabbed a little bit less into that pad and it wouldn't pick up so much, right? But kind of doing this kind of smashing of the tip like this. I'm not hitting this real hard, okay? I'm just getting this in repetition. I'm tapping this down on here lightly because that's kind of in the spirit of how I'm going to use it on here, so I'm kind of using that same light tapping. And that through repetition starts to kind of soften and somewhat fray the tip here, but don't fray it so much that it just is unusable, of course. This one's almost, it's becoming kind of really frayed. Sometimes I don't like it quite that much because I don't want these straggling pieces of cotton making marks, but let's see if, yeah, that's okay. See, when it's a real soft tip like this, it can go on nice and soft, okay? But get the consistency right, all right? It's kind of going back to like the inks, that lesson on inks in terms of not applying so much so quickly, or not being in a hurry to apply the inks too quickly. Don't be in a hurry to apply too much of this, because then it's really out of control when you're, you know, laying down a lot of ink. It's like a blob. And that's, you know, that's what people run into. It's just, it's too much, you know. And as far as the process goes for me, in applying this, it's just do very little at any given time, and the ability to kind of have things go on in a very gradual fashion gives 2 things. It gives you control, and it puts the command of creating a certain mood in a little bit more of a drawn out process, so that there's more kind of leadway for variation and for altering what you're going after, because it happens slowly, so that it creates more. There's varying degrees of, in this case, it's translucency, okay? It's building up a little bit, you know, over time, or you can build it up more, and if it takes 15 or 20 steps for that to happen, you know, you can stop at any given time. If you've applied too much, like there's too much right there, you just tap it like that. Or you can take a paper towel or something like that and tap it and rub it out, right? But that's where there's a lot of control over this. There's no point of where you're really going to come across a really kind of a mark that's kind of gone way out of control. Like I'm tapping a little bit down here. See that? It's just a really faint kind of glow right now, but if you just kind of keep adding it in like so, it kind of starts building up, and it's just a little bit at a time, okay? Right, is that little glow happening there now? And there's a little bit of glowing light on those clouds. It looks softer. Maybe I can put a little bit of a light around this moon right here. This moon has this really definitive, you know, spherical arc. I'm just going around in there a little bit and diffusing kind of the edge where the moon meets that kind of darker area. I can soften the edge of that cloud right there a little bit, like so. Hit more of this area, create a stronger glow in the center of that kind of little hazy area. One other thing about this ink, it dries a little bit. There's a brightness, I guess, to, or a lightness to this application, okay? I find that when it dries, it becomes a little bit more translucent, so it isn't quite as stark as you see it, even though it's not super stark right now. It kind of diffuses a little bit, so I put a little bit more on than kind of what I think would be ideal, just because I know what it's going to look like when it dries. And also when you spray it. It's like if you know what chalks and pastels look like when you spray them, it kind of disappears a little bit. Because this pigment ink is almost like, it's like suspended chalk or something like that. Pigment. In kind of pad form and moisture to make it ink. But when you spray it, it kind of diffuses it a little bit. So you have to kind of go on. And if you ever spray these ones where you're doing this type of application with pigment ink, spray it from distance and kind of seal it. Don't give it a real thick spray, otherwise all of that's just going to disappear completely, just like chalks or pastels would, okay? Alright, that looks pretty good there. I think that was a good effect for that. See around in these clouds here, doesn't it have kind of a hazier look to it? Look at that right there. It's kind of a nice texture. Just look at it from a textural standpoint, okay? These areas right in here. It works, you know, it works really good for this scene. And this scene right here, let's take a look at that. Maybe around that sun. Maybe making it not quite so sharp. put a little bit of haze or light on some of those trees. Okay, and I'll show you what those trees now look like. There's a little bit of diffusion of them, right? Instead of black, it's somewhat of gray. I didn't do the whole thing. So there's an oscillation of crisp and diffused right there. And what that'll look like from distance is that. Subtle, isn't it? And I think that's about all I would do there. I know. Looks like a nice place in the morning to be fishing. Very scenic as a location. Fishing, the fishing hole or whatever. Alright. Okay. A lot of diffusion, a little bit of diffusion, and no diffusion. I think this one already has kind of a certain mood to it. There's a kind of a, oh, what would the word be? It already has kind of a subtle sort of appearance to it in terms of the lighting in here. Muted, I guess I could say. This one's really muted in terms of the imagery. I mean, the imagery in the foreground's crisp, but it's kind of subtle in terms of the contrast created by the background and the foreground. The contrast is fairly close, you know. It's really dark back there, and we have this dark figure. Except for these, you know, trees going up here into the stars. This one's more crisp in terms of the lighting. I think the character of this one's defined by... See, this goes back to this right here. I think this is a prime example of what I was mentioning in the previous video about sky figures right here. And I wasn't thinking about this when I was doing it, okay? I was just thinking about these in terms of visuals, okay? But I think this is what happens here. Here's this moon right here, okay? We're thinking of soft light, right? When we're thinking about a moon in terms of what's happening in here. There's this little diffusion in here. It's a softer light. And, you know, we have this element of softness running in here. It was important to retain the light of the moon here, you know, or a lighter area. I kind of put a little bit of tone over it just so that it isn't so stark. And this kind of subtle application of translucent ink in here really kind of plays a part in the whole mood of moonlight, okay? Now we have this scene right here where we have these rays of the sun coming out, okay? And I've retained the lightness of that by just not inking it over. I put a little bit of tone into it in terms of a couple dabs of yellow, but the rays are for the most part left alone. Okay, so that's kind of setting the mood of this scene where we can have some nice crisp highlights, right? Because those crisp highlights right there are kind of reiterating the arms of these, you know, these light beams coming out, right? And then this one right here, not that I don't do this in other scenes, but I didn't really retain any of the the white of the page, I retained a lighter area, but I did put some tone over those ones. And so in doing so, kind of following suit with the rest of the things, I don't have like a real crisp highlight on anything, okay? Because there aren't really crisp highlights to, or lights to cast that highlight. So I think this looks fine just without it. It looks a little bit more muted and it takes on kind of a different mood. So, that being said, talking about sky figures and lighting, kind of creating or setting the mood for our different scenes, and I think that's the case with these three right here. Now, I mean, see, in this one right here, I could have left some of those a little bit more stark white, you know, the white of the page in the middle there, and then maybe it would be appropriate to add nice crisp stars around there with the gel pen or whatever and put some highlights on some of these trees. That would look fine. I could still do that on here. I just don't think it needs it. This one right here, some nice crisp beams of light. If I muted all that out right there, that sun with the rays, it wouldn't stand out very much at all, especially against the what's defining it, which is an orange impression, okay? If I stamped it out in black and I colored it in with the yellow, then it would stand out enough, you know? But in doing it in the orange there, orange isn't a really super dark color anyway. It's more of a medium value. So it was important to kind of stay away from that in terms of applying a lot of ink there. And on this one, thankfully we have things like gel pens and whatnot. Oh, okay, I forgot to add some additional tone. Let me see here. Here's some alcohol inks. This one's a... Let's try the pale blue and aquamarine. I think the pale blue is going to be way too light to add in any type of tone to this at all, because the background is already darker than that. Let's go with the aquamarine. Maybe this one's a little bit too light as well. That one's really dark. But it's not very dark against this. Actually, that one looks pretty good. Kind of fleshing that in a little bit. Just taking it an extra little step. I don't want that cloud that's running through there to be quite as apparent. It didn't really bother me much, or really at all. I kind of completely forgot about it. But okay, now I'm going back into this, and this is kind of removing a little bit of that. What was that previous one? Cyan blue. It's kind of mixing it up. I still want a little bit of variation, but oops, that looks pretty good right now. See, I'm just kind of toning this down a little bit, adding a little bit of extra value in here, just to kind of bring that lighthouse a little bit out of the background with the use of tone, making it more opaque. Let me see here. What is this one? Cerulean blue. Let me add this to a little bit of the undersides of some of these features on the lighthouse. This one's a little bit darker. So, see what I'm doing here? If you have some different values in your pens, okay? You can do this with dye-based inks as well. If you have some values here, what I'm doing is I've just worked that lighthouse through a series of blue values, starting from light and working in the darker tones. If you're working with alcohol pens, you can go to the dark And if you've added too much of the dark, you can go back into the lighter one, and you can still kind of move that color around a little bit. It'll kind of remove. And it won't remove the dye-based ink, because the dye-based ink is a water-based ink, so it's not mixing with that. Alright? But you can use your lighter alcohol pens as kind of a blending tool. Alright, so that was kind of what I needed on that lighthouse, making it a little bit more, or a lot more, opaque. Alright, so there we have it. 3 different scenes, 3 different backgrounds, kind of taken into more of a complete scenic stamping statement, I guess you can say. And I think they look pretty good as far as having a full composition and finishing treatment, even though we started off with, you know, backgrounds that were already kind of established in the form of those, you know, here's the ones that I didn't do right here. So even when you have kind of full backgrounds, you know, edge to edge, no space for really anything else, in some ways, you might say, you really can do a lot with the stamps that are kind of more silhouette based and solid in nature. The Lakeside Cove one did have some open rocks down here. The lighthouse did have this lighter area where, you know, some of that background was showing through. But, I don't know, there's still, you know, that's the thing I like about scenic stamping. There's so many different things you can do with a scene, with a given scene. Trying to get this all kind of as close up as I can while seeing them all, but yeah, there's plenty of things that you can still do with the type of imagery that's available out there. Okay, I can't have things that are way too open. Like I said, I don't think a cabin stamped in there would be good. Okay, because it has too much open space, and you'd have the clouds and sky figures and moon or whatever and stars just shining right through kind of the lightest areas of, like, say, something like this. Okay, can't stamp it down here and have that light. Right? So things that, you know, any kind of solid imagery, or things that are fairly solid, can still work over the tops of things like billowy light clouds, right? So, fun stuff. I really like the looks of these types of scenes a lot of times. I think when you hit these with a lot of those saturated tones running in there, they can really look like jewels. And what I'm going for in that type of ink application is with this reflected light, it gives the illusion that the light is kind of coming from within the scene. So, fun stuff, fun looks, and really comes out really nice. They really come out nicely when you spray them too. It'll look really close to this. So, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you enjoyed kind of the part 1 of this with the sky figures and how I kind of brought them into complete scenes.